Hello, I'm Suzanne James for Green Left. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of this land on which we live and work and pay my respects to the elders past and present. I also acknowledge all people of diversity and champion their right to self-determination. Speaking of self-determination, today we'll be hearing an update on voluntary assisted dying, both around the world, nationally and locally here in New South Wales and Victoria, from the lovely president of Dying with Dignity Victoria, the wonderful Jane Morris. Jane, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Suzanne, and thank you very, very much for asking me. I've been looking forward to this.
Now, back in October, you flew all the way to Dublin to participate in the International VAD conference. Tell us how that came about briefly and whose conference that is. How does that all work and what was your outcomes?
I attended the World Federation of Right to Die Societies conference, which was held in Dublin this year, in Dunlowry, I think you pronounce it as. And this is a biennial conference held every 2 years, obviously, and I had attended the one in Toronto the year before. It is a fantastic opportunity to actually meet with all the representatives of other organisations in the world. And it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to stand back and see the progress that some countries have made, and for example, the Netherlands and Canada, but by the same token, see the countries that have made no progress at all. So there's a lot for us to learn from those progressive countries, and there's a lot for us to help and teach the other countries who are trying so much to get this legislation across.
That brings us to the recent vote in Westminster in the UK, which was a positive result to bring in voluntary assisted dying in the United Kingdom. Was that a surprise to people in the VAD movement?
Well, it was a very, very exciting result. It was a surprise in as much as that was the first time in a decade that Westminster MPs had been given the chance to vote for a voluntary assisted dying bill. The last one was soundly defeated. Leading up to this vote in the House of Commons, the campaign was, I can really only say, nasty. We saw the worst of journalism in many, many aspects, and it got very personal and quite vindictive. It was, however, wonderful to see the way the MPs conducted themselves. I listened to the whole debate for, I think it lasted 5 hours, and everyone was very respectful and courteous. It was incredible to find the vote was 330 to 275. However, this does not mean that it will actually become legislation. There's still a few little hurdles to go through, and the bill now goes to committee stage, where it's put under a lot of scrutiny and the amendments are looked at and more amendments are suggested, then goes up to the House of Lords to be voted upon, and then it can sort of to and fro a bit from the House of Reps to the House of Commons to the House of Lords before it will finally be passed as legislation. And this may take 6 months or so. But look, it is very, very exciting that finally some sort of legislation has been passed.
Now, you no sooner got back from that trip, having caught COVID on the way back through, unfortunately, you no sooner recovered from that and you were off to Brisbane for the Australia New Zealand VAD conference. Tell us about that.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic, this conference as well. It brings together all VAD researchers, people involved in VAD implementation from around Australia, and I have to say our adopted 7th state, which has now become New Zealand. And we heard from some people that I never ever thought we'd be hearing giving presentations. And this included directors of palliative care. There was a director of palliative care from St Vincent's Hospital, Melbourne. We had the team who worked at a hospice in New Zealand called Tutara, and that is the only hospice in New Zealand that will allow voluntary assisted dying. So really, from when we passed our legislation in Victoria in 2017, there was this great chasm, or there seemed to be a great chasm between palliative care and voluntary assisted dying. We've always insisted they're complementary practices. And a lot of people have said in the beginning didn't agree with that at all, but we can see the bridge being built and there's a lot more acceptance, which is absolutely fantastic. We also heard from a lot of speakers, and it was good to acknowledge that dementia, the inability of individuals diagnosed with dementia to access a voluntary assisted death is something they cannot do. And this is something that is of overwhelming concern to everyone we speak to. Every time we give a presentation, that is what people want. And obviously that's found all over Australia and all over the world. But we had some great speakers talking about that, which is wonderful.
Now, a lot of the pushback against the VAD movement, of course, comes from the church worldwide. I note that the inaugural Rodney Syme Award was awarded at the Brisbane conference. It was awarded to Christians for voluntary assisted dying. Is that correct? Tell us about that.
Well, the Rodney Syme Award is, it recognises the distinguished effort in pursuit of excellence in the field of voluntary assisted dying. And this year we gave it to Ian Wood. And Ian Wood developed many decades ago with the Reverend Trevor Bench from Adelaide, a group of Christians promoting, at the time they called it euthanasia. And Reverend Bench has since died, and Ian has carried this over, and he has just been fantastic. The way he has rebutted and retold many of these horrific stories we hear from the opposition. And I know when I've been overseas or at other conferences, people are absolutely amazed to hear that we actually have a Christian leading an organisation which is promoting voluntary assisted dying. So we've always been in awe of Ian, and he still, even after suffering quite a major health event last year, is still doing everything he can to help the cause.
Yes, I often note that my late mother, may she rest in peace, she was a good Christian woman all her life, and she always preached that compassion for others was the primary Christian value. So it's great to see that there's so many of them that are still practicing real Christianity, as opposed to trying to practice social control over the rest of us. So that brings us to state-based RAP. Now, I know you're Victorian-based, so tell us first what's happening in Victoria. I know there's been a number of reports come out which gives research and statistics. Some of it's been covered in the Sydney Morning Herald. Very positive. It shows that the coercion issue is nowhere near the issue the opposition would have us believe, that most people try to talk their loved ones out of it. It also shows very positive feedback in relation to how the process is working and the safeguards, although most of the reports do note there is still a number of access blockers, especially for people in remote areas with things like the telehealth bill and things like that. So where are you at with all that in Victoria?
Well, at the beginning of this year, we provided a submission to the Victorian Health Department, and they were doing a review of the first 5 years of VAD legislation in Victoria. It was, unfortunately, we say, a review purely looking at the operation of the legislation, and one that wouldn't result in any legislative changes, any recommendations for legislative changes. We, however, as you were saying, acknowledge that access and equity to the bill is a major, major problem. There are many reasons why people have trouble accessing VAD, and that might be conscientious objection from some of the facilities. Some doctors aren't happy to participate, and unfortunately they have no legal obligation to refer someone on to a VAD-friendly doctor. We have the massive, massive gag clause, which is probably the worst impediment of the whole process, where a doctor cannot.
That's only relevant in 2 states, though, is that correct?
Yes, just in Victoria and South Australia, and also New Zealand has it. We really just want to keep on and try and hear the stories of people and see how this legislation can be improved. We, as yet, have not had the report back from the state government. We are awaiting it and have been assured that even though Parliament's no longer sitting this year, the report still will be tabled in Parliament. So we'll be very interested to see that. But as I said, we're not holding our breath that there'll be any legislative change.
Well, I was very lucky recently to have been invited to attend the 50th birthday of Dying with Dignity in New South Wales. And it also fell last week, not only on Alex Greenwich's birthday, who of course was instrumental in getting it across the line in New South Wales, along with Shane Higson and Penny and many others that worked very hard down here to get that done. It also corresponded with the first anniversary of its operation in New South Wales, and they're having many of the same discussions that you're having down there in relation to improved access, etc. I must commend New South Wales Health on the information they've put out. Their website's terrific, and they now have in all 15 health districts a VAD intake officer that people can contact, which will help them guide them through that process if they want some further information. Which brings us to the Northern Territory, who of course were the first in the world and the first in Australia to have VAD legislation that was taken off them after only 4 people were able to access it to peacefully end their lives by Conservatives who overturned, using a federal law anomaly, the ability for territories to legislate their own legislation. Following the recent rescinding of that, the Australian Capital Territory has brought in VAD legislation. Northern Territory is still struggling to do so. So I'm part of a push to get some more momentum behind that and try and get a private members bill up. And we've got a couple of MPs up there that are very interested. And one of your young ambassadors that's joining the team now. So hopefully we can get some more traction there. Do you have any insight into how DWDs and Go Gentles Australia-wide may be able to assist the Northern Territory in that process?
Well, Suzanne, for the last, I think it's 8 years, we have been having a national Zoom every 6 weeks, which is absolutely fabulous. All the presidents and other board members, if they want to join in on this national Zoom. And we're all so interested in helping each other. There's just such a great sense of collaboration and friendship, I think. And we have been trying to do everything in our power to help the Northern Territory. Every state is offering to do, even if it's just a small task. We've helped Northern Territory VES with their website. And I know New South Wales, Queensland, as I said, everyone is just there to help them, and we'll do anything we can. It's very hard, I think, for us to really step in because I've been assured by Judy Dent that the Northern Territorians do not like Southerners telling them what to do. But as I said, you know, if someone asks us for support, we are all there and wanting to see it. Judy Dent, as you know, her husband was the first person to be helped to die with an assisted death, and she has carried on with this organisation since then. She has done an absolutely sterling job, and as much as I personally want to see the legislation tabled in the Northern Territory, I would also just love to see it for Judy as well as the Territorians.
Well, there's a lot there, isn't there, Jay? There's a lot happening in VAD world right now, and it's fantastic to see so much support, and also the frontline support services with hospices and VAD end-of-life doulas, all those things that we see coming across now. It certainly helps ease the pain for the families and the people who are seeking to assist voluntary assisted dying. Any final observations you'd like to make, Jane, about how it's all going?
Oh, just, Suzanne, just from a personal perspective, I am loving it. I mean, I'm not loving it because friends are coming to me saying they know someone's that is dying, but I've actually had 5 friends who've asked advice and just wanting to know more about VAD. You know, they've always been interested in what I do, and now suddenly it's, oh, but I really want to know about it. And it's just so heartening to think this is becoming more accepted, more common, and people are willing to talk about it. And that's what we need, because there's still a great proportion of the population that have no idea that voluntary assisted dying has been a legal end-of-life option in Victoria for the last, 5-6 years.
Just so everybody's clear, we are talking about terminally ill people who, if they get approval, need to have probably 6 months or less to live. It's not as easy to get as people think. It's no longer a euthanasia or suicide issue. It's voluntary assisted dying at the behest and wishes only of the person who is terminally ill and who will die anyway. Jane Morris, it's been fantastic to have you give us the roundup today. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure, Suzanne. Love talking to you, and thank you for all the work you do on this issue. It is so greatly appreciated.
I'd like to thank my editors at Green Left for that. They're very understanding and very supportive of the movement. So thank you very much for your time today, ladies and gentlemen. That was Jane Morris, President of Dying with Dignity Victoria, giving us the national, international and local wrap on voluntary assisted dying legislation and its status around Australia. I'm Suzanne James for Green Left. Thank you for joining us.